it last time. I was too early this time.
Hi, everybody. So today we're going to be telling you a little bit about limited liability corporations. So to start off, I'm Jessica Hoofnagle.
I'm Libby Parent.
I'm Herok.
I'm Aria Child.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about what LLC is. LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. LLC is used to own and operate a business. LLC is a kind of the business structure in the USA. Many independent business people use the LLC when creating their company. LLC are popular because they provide the same limited liability as a corporation, but are easier and cheaper to form and run. If you have a LLC, you use your personal tax instead of for the company. Yeah, this is my part, and go next.
All right, so there are many pros and cons to having an LLC. As Herok said, one of the first ones is that they're generally pretty simple to form and maintain. In most states, you can actually file online in a matter of minutes. And once you file, they can exist in perpetuity as long as you maintain them. So that maintenance is going to include things like filing an annual report, holding an annual meeting, and completing your taxes. So as long as you do those things, they can last as long as you want. In general, they're also pretty inexpensive. Generally, the fees are pretty nominal, although this varies by state, which we'll talk about a little bit more in just a minute. The biggest pro of having an LLC is right in the name. It's going to protect the owner from a lot of types of personal liability. So that includes things like business debts, vendor disputes, damages. In any of these cases, the owner's personal assets can't be attacked. There are, of course, exceptions to this. For example, if the owner commits fraud, or if they're commingling personal and business funds, or if they're failing to meet those LLC requirements, like holding the annual meeting. But in general, it's going to have very good protections for the owner. Another big pro is that it has very flexible tax options. So you can file your LLC using the pass-through method, which we'll talk about more in a little bit, or as a C Corp or an S Corp. And we'll get into that a little bit more later, but that flexibility is something that draws a lot of people to LLCs. Another pro is that there's no restrictions on the number of members an LLC can have. So you can have as few as one or as many as 100 or more. The one thing to keep in mind with that is that the more members you have, the more difficult it can be, administration can become, but it is nice to have that flexibility. And another flexibility that LLCs have is unrestricted pay to members. So members can be paid more or less than their respective share of ownership. That does have a few cons that can crop up with that, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. One of the first cons can be the cost and the annual fees, the fact that they vary. As I said, they're normally pretty inexpensive, but the annual fee in particular is something that varies by state. So that can be as little as $0 to $800 or more. The one interesting thing is that you can get around this using the fact that you can file in a state other than the one you're living or working in. And so you can choose what state has a lower fee that you want to file in. The one thing to keep in mind with that is that you are going to have to pay the income rate on taxes of the state in which you file. So you just have to balance the low annual fee with a low tax rate. In general, though, they are going to be cheaper to maintain than an S Corp or C Corp, a little bit costlier than a sole proprietorship. Another con is going to be the self-employment and excise taxes. Even if you're going to be filing using that pass-through method that we'll explain in a bit, you're still going to have to pay a self-employment tax of up to 7.5% on your share of profit. And that's going to be regardless of how much you're actually given. So that's just something to keep in mind. And with that tax flexibility being so nice, it does mean that there are a lot more tax forms that you have to deal with. So that's another thing to consider. And then something else that can be a con is the fact that draws can misalign an owner's tax burden. So the IRS doesn't recognize the right of an LLC to pay its owners a salary, so they have to take money out as draws. The difference between a salary and a draw is just that a salary is a set wage that the owner pays themselves every pay period, whereas a draw is when they take out as much money as they need it. So there's nothing wrong with that, but if the owner takes out draws that aren't proportional to their shares, they may be taxed on more or less than they actually earned. And then the last big con of an LLC is that it can be difficult to raise outside capital. That's just because the only way for someone to invest in the LLC is to become a member. And for some investors, that's going to be too risky, so they're not going to want to do it. So yeah, lots of pros, lots of cons. It's just determining what's going to be most important for you and if an LLC is going to match up to that. Jason Momoa, keeping you guys interested. So there are a lot of examples of LLCs in the real world, many of which you've heard of. The first one's going to be Alphabet. Now, Google's actually a subsidiary of this company. So they have tons of subsidiaries in lots of different fields, from, tech, like with Google, to things like, the medical industry. The next one's going to be Amazon. Now, the main corporation is set up as a C Corp, but Amazon does actually have a lot of LLCs set up in different states. They do that to reduce their tax burden and to help spread out liability. Then, we have Apple, Nike, Pepsi Cola, ExxonMobil, Johnson & Johnson, GE. And if you guys remember that nice lawyer who came in to talk to us the other day, Matthew Goings, he actually has himself set up as an LLC, which is going to be Goings Legal.
So I'm going to talk to you guys about how an LLC functions. This information was kind of hard to locate, just because I think it's kind of coincides with how to form one. But an LLC can function almost the same way as like a mutual partnership, where the company's profits pass through to the tax returns of the owner of the company. And an LLC can offer anything from asset protection and favorable taxation. Asset protection. So how to form an LLC. In most states, not all, you choose a legal name and then you reserve it, so it's yours. You draft and file articles of incorporation with your Secretary of State, so whichever one is your Secretary of State, you file with them. Then you decide who runs the business. It could be anywhere from members to managers, a third party. It just who runs this corporation. And then you decide how many owners will be part of LLC. So if you have 2 owners, so your co-owners, you decide who gets, if it's 50-50 or anything else. You apply for a business license and other certificates related to your industry, self-explanatory. You file Form SS4 or apply online at the IRS website to obtain an employer identification number. And then you apply for any other ID number required by your state or local government. And from anything from like disability to unemployment, you're going to need an additional employer identification number for that.
Okay, so tax implications. So the best part about the LLC, the limited liability company, is that you do not have to pay federal taxes. Their profits and losses are passed through to the members who claim those profits and losses on their personal tax returns. So limited liability companies allow the profits to be passed through directly to the investor, so that they are taxed only once, instead of being taxed at the corporate level and the personal level. So it kind of like stops double taxation from happening. So one different thing is that they can have one member LLCs, or you can have as many as you want. So for those LLCs that only have one member, IRS treats one member LLCs as sole proprietorships of tax purposes. So again, the LLC is not taxed, but all of the company's earnings are put on the head of the owner itself. So whenever they file their personal taxes, the 1040 tax return, they also have to submit this thing called a Schedule C. So the other kind of LLC is like 2 or more member. And so in this case, the LLC owners each pay taxes to their share of the profits and incomes on their personal tax returns. And they also have to submit the Schedule E, which is just another form. So the LLC must provide each of its members with the Schedule K form, and then they will attach this to their personal income whenever they turn it into the IRS. So there's also other ways you can tax your LLC. If you don't want to do it that way, you can file your LLC as a corporate. And that's good because if you regularly need to keep like putting amounts into the LLC to retain earnings, this helps you from losing money in a way. But the only problem with this is that you can get taxed double at the corporate level and then also at the personal level. And then as Jessica mentioned earlier, one like con to LLCs is that you have to do self-employment taxes. So LLC members are not employees, therefore they do not have to pay Social Security or Medicare. It's not withheld from their paychecks. So to make up for that, they have to submit these self-employment taxes. So that's not always the most fun. And then on a state level, some states do tax the LLCs, such as like California, there's like an annual fee of $800, which is a little expensive, but most states do not. And then as Jessica mentioned, as one of the pros is that you can pick whatever state you want to tax your company in. So yeah, so that's the tax implications. And there is a lot of more details I can go into that. So I'll wait to see if you guys have any questions as a class and I can answer it more specifically. So here is our bibliography and all of our sources. And that's it. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.